have everyone here watching. I'm just putting the link in so everyone can see. Would love for you to say hello in the chat when you jump on, and good morning, Asha.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. It's just the two of us again.
It is.
And
Yeah,
things just happen the way they do, right? So you just
indeed.
got to go with the flow and see how things pan out, and you know that's life. Shit happens, as they say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
And yeah, obviously looking forward to Nicolette joining us when she can. And yeah. And in the meantime, it's still really nice to be able to connect and have these chats and send some love her way and to everyone else's way as well.
Yeah, because as we jumped on, you were just saying how you think feeling like it was going to slow down as the end of the year comes, and it's sort of been revving up a little bit. So we never know what's going to happen, right?
Absolutely. It kind of feels like almost that like electrically charged madness before the storm hits. You know, that kind of feeling. And I'm not sure if I'm the only one that's feeling it. I'm sure that's not the case. But yeah, no, that definitely seems to have been the vibe my way anyway. So yeah, I'm looking for the downpour, looking forward to the downpour and then also the calm after the storm as well.
Yeah. And like it makes me think of, because living up in far north Queensland for so long, I've been through quite a few cyclones, and on the weekend, it was like a category 1. It was so windy here. It was full on.
Wow.
But just when you were talking, I remember the eye of the storm, because everything's really quiet. There's no wind, there's no noise, there's no birds. If you've ever been to the ocean, when like there's no tide, like everything just
Mm.
know,
Mm.
ready for the next side of the cyclone. So
It's almost that like eerie still, isn't it? You're just like, oh, something's about to hit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting time. I remember distinctly I hadn't brought I had an outdoor fridge, and I hadn't brought it in, and it had opened the doors up and stuff was going everywhere. And I remember in the eye, I went to turn it around at least so that the door wouldn't swing open. My daughter was freaking out. Get back in. We don't know how big the eye is. So yeah, it was so funny. Just brought back memories. That's all.
Yeah, definitely. It reminds me of the movie Twister as well. Trying to beat it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So we've got a few people on here this morning. So good morning. Lovely to have you saying hi in the chat. We don't have your names, unfortunately, but we're saying good morning to you anyway. So today we're going to be talking about spirituality, science, and religion. I love this. I love this. This is one of my favorite topics.
Yes. Admittedly, when you brought it up at the end of our last chat and going, okay, what are we going to talk about next time? And you brought it up, and I could instantly feel the wealth of knowledge that you have around the conglomeration of these 3 mega categories. And, so yeah, it always.
Yeah, it's been part of my journey, basically, since I woke up, because I wasn't born into a religious family. My mum and dad were in church prior to me being born, but were out of it by the time I'm the last child. And but my auntie is she's a Christian. And so I did have it in my life. And at one stage I identified as a Christian. Like I moved that way. I've read the Bible twice from cover to cover. And just found it, because I was coming from a non-religious place when I first read it, I'd already done all this information. I'd already gathered all this stuff. I read it from a really different perspective. And even my auntie and cousin were like, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way. You know, like when I'd find something and go and pull it apart, you know, and that relates to this and this and this, you know, and yeah, so it's a really great book to read when you don't have a judgment of it, because we often come from our own limited perspective and conditioning, depending on what your condition is, you know, what conditions you've had of your perspective of religion or God, or, you know, how you were brought up in the first place, that can hold molds around how you're going to perceive the book when you read it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think what's fascinating about what you just said is that you engaged with the text from that observational perspective, you know, and where you were able to tie things together. And I think that's so important, and is kind of the theme of you know, bringing science, spirituality, and religion together, because it's in the common threads that we can start to look at where the inherent value lies. Because I think
so true.
Yeah. I think, you know, yeah, just in full transparency, I haven't read the Bible cover to cover, so that I do have.
You know what? Yeah. A lot of Christians or a lot of people haven't. Yeah. When I went there, it was like, oh, you haven't read the book that you're following? Like, I couldn't believe it. People had read bits of it, but to get the actual context of it as a story of light and dark, you know, like the story of you know, the shadow self and the you know, enlightened being and the hero's journey, and you know, that's Jesus's journey is just the same as, you know, any other hero's journey, right? Discovering himself and understanding himself and becoming enlightened and you know, going on the adventure of, you know, of awakening, basically.
And then
it's surprising. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to say, you know, and then through that hero's journey, being able to share some of the gems and wisdoms and I think so. Yeah, just in that full transparency, I haven't read the Bible. However, when you pose this to me, because I have done a lot of meditation on the combining of science and spirituality, and so this third leg of more religious text, you know, I did the same thing. I had to kind of stand back and go, okay, well, if I look at it from an observation perspective, what is the function of the text, and how has it served humanity, and how has it prevailed for thousands of years, you know, and I think that's there when we can come at it from an understanding and look for the inherent value, then we can absorb what continues to serve us and not get so caught up on the details, which I think is where a lot of friction and separation comes in, because there's focus on the minutia rather than what's the governing idea here.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything's up for interpretation, right? We're perceiving through our own lens, and we're making it all up. Like we're just, you know, we're making it all up. And so it actually is pertinent to this, is really interesting, because one of my clients this morning messaged me and she said, oh, you know, I just did a recode, and in the recode I had all these maggots coming out of my head, and is that normal? Right? And so and I said to her, you know, everything, like the superconscious, which is just, you know, when let's bring science into it, the quantum field of all information, wants to give you as much information as possible. So often it comes through in symbols, because then you can interpret all of the information from it. Well, religion's the same thing. That when you read the Bible and you hear, that Moses was talking to God, and God came down and said this, and Revelations is just full of images that were then interpreted.
Yeah.
And so it's still the same thing going on now. Is where have we evolved to? What's our consciousness now of reading and interpreting that information? And unfortunately, but in a way, it's all meant to be. Science is understanding it, and it's pulling it apart in a mathematical context, but it's a lot slower than when you open up to the fact that, let's let go and surrender to the unknown. Whereas science is, it has to be black and white, and they've got to, see everything, but it's all one and the same.
Yeah. Yeah, I really agree. I think the key difference is in language and how we frame it, and what gives us the biggest sense of safety and security. And in you bringing this kind of topic to the table, I did do a little bit of my own kind of research yesterday, and have been meditating on it.
That's so cool. Like that makes me feel good, just like the fact that we've got a topic, and so you've gone in and delved in a little bit more. So, this gives the opportunity for our audience to do the same, right?
Absolutely. And when I knew we were jumping online speaking this morning, I kind of thought to myself, gee, I wish I had just a few more years before I was having this conversation, right?
Yeah.
It's an immense conversation to have.
It is.
And I kind of say that with lightness and with respect for the intricacies of the stories and fables told, and the richness that exists within the Bible. And so when I was doing some of my own research and the fables and stories and the meanings derived from that, there's just so much narrative on life covered by it. It really is, and like I just actually want to hold respect for the enormity of what it's actually providing narrative for. And so then it becomes this kind of, okay, well, when we're looking at the combining and looking at the inherent value of everything and how things have lasted across time, we start to get that more zoomed out perspective. And some of the things that occurred to me in terms of how the pendulum has swung since man's evolution or humankind's evolution. And I'll just kind of talk through what occurred to me, and I would love for you to weigh in and
go for it. And this is what's really, just as an add-in, this is what's really, you say I'd love to have a couple of more years, but that's just for the detail, right?
Yeah.
That when you can come from a higher perspective and look down at, and you're intuitive anyway. It's the knowledge that our smaller self or our identity wants, so that we can, grasp hold of it. But here we are, we're 40, we're 15, 17 minutes in, and we're still having a conversation regardless, right?
Absolutely. Well, it's so rich and broad, and sometimes it's okay to place. It's great to place something on the table and go, here is my intuitive and initial take, and I hold space for the fact that there's, it's likely to be so much richer and so much more in depth and broad and all of it. But I think the willingness to have the conversation anyway, because they're big conversations, and they're conversations that really matter.
Yeah.
And so in terms of kind of that timeline, what, as far as, you know, my catalog tells me, is what this is really a narrative of is how consciousness has played out across time. You know, so
Yeah.
if we
Yeah.
if we I love that. Yeah.
Because it's basically about from shadow to consciousness. Like that. I mean, you know, the promised land that they all went to is enlightenment. The joys of life. It's loving your experience of life and being in your higher realms. And keep going. Sorry, I get excited about this.
I think we might have to do a series on this. And
maybe. Yeah, I think so. Hey,
can be a shared evolution. Yeah. So from that consciousness across time, you know, what we're really looking at across those three disciplines of science, spirituality, and religion is, if science only really takes us back to the Big Bang, you know, like a millisecond before that, it's always begged the question of what came before that. You know, and so if we look at the birthplace of creation, whether you look at that as God or infinite intelligence or the place of no thing and all potential, then the Big Bang symbolizes the birth of all potential into the space-time continuum.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and with it being the birth of all potential across the space-time, that meant that it was separated across the space-time continuum. And then when we look at the formation of, you know, galaxies, the solar system, Earth, everything coming back together and finding one another, being remagnetized towards one another, and then the evolution of humankind out of that, we've then we evolved with the five senses, which gives an illusion of separation. And
absolutely.
yeah. And so then as if we look at that consciousness of all potential being birthed, it means that everything holds a consciousness and an infinite intelligence, which is life, right? That's the manifestation of life. From my perspective, in my words, holding the fact that you know, we're in language pitfalls and hotspot territory, right?
I love it. And we're holding space. We're holding space for that. Absolutely.
Exactly. So then if we look at the fact that everything holds an infinite intelligence, and as human beings, we are limited by our senses to perceive things as separate, which was the entire point, in my view, of all potential being birthed across the space-time continuum. It was so we could encounter those separate experiences and potentialities and absorb the richness from that separated potential, right? Because that, and so as human beings, we're conscious of consciousness living out, right?
Yes.
And then because we've got competing forces of how do I survive and make meaning of my experience, then we get the unfolding or the development of the Bible, which is when people come together and go, okay, well, if we know we've got to survive and live harmoniously and so together and have a meaning about life, what morals and codes can we say as a collective we'll subscribe to in order to keep the collective safe? And from my view, the fundamental double-edged sword of that is that with any moral or code, it implies a right and wrong. And then the structure imposed of how, as a collective, we were going to hold one another accountable to that was what is rewarded and what is punished. And you see, you know, a lot of the narrative unfolded from this idea of a moral and code, right and wrong, reward and punishment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now that is central to a separation mentality, right? And so then whilst there is value in collective and community and shared ethos, what we then saw happen was the outfall of separation and of a judicial system that punished based on ideas that didn't actually sit with the true nature of how the world and universe operates. So then humankind butts up against the edges of where these ideas actually fall in terms of how consciousness plays out. So in a very real way, we started to set ourselves up for some of the modes of being that humankind has showed they're well and truly capable of, which is the darker side of the coin. Essentially all the sins, greed, jealousy, so then when we set ourselves up for that, I see that science stepped in and went, okay, well, there are edges to that belief system. Now let's look at it from an objective perspective. But what that, again, because everything is a double-edged sword, what that did was took out it essentially threw the baby out with the bathwater and took out belief and meaning, and how meaning about life and that what we're encountering and our own belief system is actually fundamental to the flourishing of life. So then
it actually took out consciousness too. It took out that there was some sort of divine consciousness. It was such a neutral place. Science is so black and white and has to be resolved, you've got the quantum, what do they call them? Pseudoscientists now. They've got a label for them. So many pseudoscientists that actually moved into this new realm of looking at quantum physics and string theory and, all of these different modes that, woke up. And so many of them are now believing God. Because or a higher perspective or a higher divine intelligence that's governing. I remember when I was working through all of this in my 30s, I think I was, and my brother's so scientific, and he's like, like everything's black and white. And I remember it, and he just hammer me every time I came out with something as I was learning it and stuff. And I remember him at his party at the pub, and he had all these friends around, and he was, he loves to be the center of attention and the limelight. And he was talking about the latest scientific theory at the time called the ghost and the machine, and that there's this governing ghost energy that is looking after and where all the machines sort of thing. And I'm listening to him, and I just couldn't help it. And I said, "What, you mean like God?" And he was fuming.
I love that. I love that, right? Because we've gotten so caught up on language and how we describe the natural forces that we start warring, and that's for me, that goes against the fundamental nature of honoring the human spirit and honoring the infinite intelligence that wants to thrive and flourish. So that's where spirituality then came in to go, okay, well, religion has some edges that we've seen kind of the double-edged sword of that play out. Science has its edges, and we've seen the double-edged sword of that play out. So for me, spirituality is more about housing the fundamental way consciousness is allows us to rediscover that divinity within, and that's actually echoed right in the first words of the Bible. It's inherent in quantum, the quantum field and manifestation, and is central to spirituality, which is the quest within, that is the enlightenment, that then, like you said earlier, is the return to the promised land. So and when we start to engage in the 3D world from this place of the richness within, and how do we start playing with the governing forces as they are, not as humankind would like them to be. Once we do that, for me, that is the integration of the three. And in housing and holding space for, there is utility in every separate potential, and it's only when we see it as a whole that it can work harmoniously. So it's the judgment of the separate potential that causes the equal and opposite pendulum swing, and that plays out in a whole bunch of ways. But when we see that it's only one potential that has to be here in order for any of it to exist, then we can start to release judgment and actually just come at it from a place of consciousness, compassion, and kindness, and go, you know what? The whole is so much greater than the sum of its parts. And now let's come back to what is central to all of it, which is being centered within the human spirit.
Yeah.
And that's my view, that's my take.
Well, so, yeah. And yeah, definitely, like, it'd be lovely for us to do a part 2, because it is so, like, it's not even, you know, the Big Bang, you know, the fall of the angels, the, you know, like each, there's a whole creation story in any, you know, the dream time, the rainbow serpent, the, you know, like there's so many different stories of the way things started, you know, like the creation. And so that whole process of just being separate, you know, like we are body, mind, and spirit, and it's connecting the three and realizing that individual separateness that we encountered, that we've been playing that out for centuries. And you know, like, religion came in and at a time when there was a lot of chaos, you know, like the pagans, you know, I think there's a lot of misinterpretation of paganism in today's society, because you know, the celebrating the full moon and the harvest and all of those things, you know, if you read the Bible, they celebrated the moon cycles as well. And so what was happening in what was so much conflict with religion and paganism was that the pagans also were looking separate, and they were separating themselves from the gods. And so everything had a ritual to it, you know, like they had to sacrifice this and sacrifice that, and bless this and bless that to different parts outside of themselves. Whereas, you know, religion came in and said, well, there's only one God. And so and then there was that divide again, and there was, you know, like, there's all the chaos, and this science comes in, right? The chaos theory and the mathematics of us moving through the Fibonacci sequence as we go and evolve into our higher domain. And so we're in this place of separation, but we're actually in the mind. And so we believe in our separation, and instead of believing in our divinity and connection to that one source of divine intelligence that we all are, and that we're actually in that field of information, we can take information, but we want to savor little bits at a time, and that's us being the individual. Like, you know, we're at a smorgasbord. You don't want to shove it all in your face. You're not going to taste the different sweet flavors, right?
Absolutely.
So we're blessed
Mm.
the opportunity to be here to savor an apple and an orange differently at different times, rather than try and shove it all into our mouth and think that we're part of the whole. And
That's
you know, like we want to experience ourselves as individual. We want to see ourselves as separate, and we want to be in the promised land where everything's available to us. And what am I going to choose this time?
yes.
You know, the
Yes.
honey milk, or the, you know, like all the different flavors that are there for the taking.
Yes.
And so yeah, it's an interesting, you know, I do feel we've already gone over time, so we'll have to we'll definitely have to, this is really a prelude to the next part. I reckon this is just a pulling apart of
Yeah.
you know, how it can all come together. And it'd be really interesting to see if Nicolette can come on next week. It'd be interesting to see what her processes or understanding of it is as well. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, so much food for thought. And yeah, such a wow, we're in the combination of these three, we're actually really tapping into the fundamentals of life. So
Yeah.
no wonder it's a big topic. You know?
Yeah. I want to end with this, because a lot of, you know, the Bible in particular, and Quran, and all, you know, like all of these different, like there's not just, in my opinion, there is not just Jesus that's come down. I resonate to Jesus big time. Like I've had specific experiences with him myself, that we can talk about in part 2, but like that's who I resonate. Some people resonate with Buddha, some people resonate with Muhammad, some people resonate with Krishna. You know, like there's so many different enlightened beings that came down with their personal version of the one true source information, right? And again, just fields of information. They've taken their bit and they've shared it with their part of the world, right?
Yes.
And so I can talk about the part. There's a couple of things that I love in the Bible that I'd like to sort of end with as a food for thought sort of process. There's a part in the Bible that really blew me out when I first started reading it. And it says, you know, God, I can't remember who God's talking to, but God says, you know, to Moses I speak face to face and in person, like and not in riddles, right? And so what he's talking about, you know, one of the things that happened to Moses on the hill is he came down, he was shining so much that they couldn't see him properly. And so, you know, like he was just touched by God. And that's this enlightenment, you know, when you meditate, you become the oneness, right?
Yeah.
Whereas when you read the Bible, you can read it in riddles.
Mm.
The same consciousness. If you're not connected into your higher self, your intuition, the oneness, God, whatever it might be, you can read those words and interpret it however you want it.
Very true.
It's so and that's why there's so many different religions that come out of the one freaking book, right? But the other part of that, and before I even read the Bible, I had this innate feeling about Jesus myself, and I used to have major arguments or really strong conversations with Christians. It was really, really interesting. I had Christians on a regular basis all through my life. I've traveled a lot and I've moved around a lot, and it didn't matter where I went, I'd find a Christian or they'd find me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of my biggest things was I used to always say, you know, Jesus came down and his thing was he was sharing the message of unconditional love, non-judgment, compassion, and understanding. He did not want to be put on a pedestal. when you really look at the 10 Commandments, it's actually not laws, it's not commandments, it's actually ways of being when you're enlightened. And so if you come from that place, and also Jesus said in the Bible, you will do great works as I, and even more. He knew that we were going to evolve into this place, and that there was be heaven on earth, and when you're nearing the end times in what they say in the Bible, where there's chaos and there's a lot of stuff coming out, and we can either focus on that, or we can stay focused on what our true self is, and stay in that end result. So it's very exciting.
Indeed. What a way to kick off Monday morning.
Yes, exactly. So I do, anyone that's watching or watching the replay, good morning, Helen. Lovely to have you on here. Just have a think about it, because, there's many, many people that have got different views on a lot of different things. Religion's a hot topic. Vaccinations are a hot topic at the moment. Like there's things that, and one of the things that I just like to leave everyone with is, when you are not centered and really comfortable with who you are on that topic, that's when you'll get defensive. And that's when you'll have challenges around somebody else's opinion of something or choices. When you're okay with your choice and you're sitting in your center, you're totally okay for someone else to have an opinion, a different view, a different action, because you know that that's their choice and it doesn't really affect you.
Yeah.
Because you can sit in it,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like my takeaway also from this is, when we said, okay, let's put these 3 mega beasts on the table.
Yeah.
It was the fundamental question I asked myself is, where does the value lie? So I think if someone does hold that differing perspective, where does the value lie, and how has that served them? Because humans will hold on to what serves them in some way. And so when you can understand that and connect on the relatability of, I see how that has and is serving you, and so that makes sense to me why you've
chosen that. Yeah.
Then I think we can start to have respectful conversations, because I think the last takeaway that I would have for our, our listeners to kind of think about and mull over is one of the cuttings of the double-edged sword that I have seen of science is this idea that it's too hot, so we'll take the hands off. And the absence of the discussion and the absence of how do we have these conversations respectfully is central to the ethos that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And it's really the only way we can come back to that neutrality, which is what you're talking about in the centeredness of self. In you have located your truth, your core, your understanding, your place of resonance. And now let's understand that the richness is actually in variety, choice, and how we honor one another through this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. What a great way to finish off. Well, enjoy your week. I don't have anything in particular that I can think of that I've got this week, but You got anything on exciting?
Just
life in general.
Yeah, life in general, some clients, that kind of thing. So yeah, all just the regular.
Yeah, the regular. Yeah. Well, we'll come on next week and tell each other whether that was the truth.
Yeah.
Take care, everyone. I just will show. Thank you, Helen. Helen's just put here a great comment about defensiveness. Yeah, it's so true. When you're really connected to your truth, right, then you're okay with other people having their truth. So true. Love to you, Asha. Enjoy your week. Everyone else, enjoy your week, and we will catch up next week. See ya.